Hi, I'm JJ and welcome to my review of the new Sony Xperia XZ1 Compact. I may sound a little congested, I've got a cold at the moment, so sorry about that. This will be a stripped down review, meaning there'll be little in the way of specs and no benchmarks. Everything will be based on my own observations, having used it as my primary device now for long enough to identify the good and bad points, and I'll give my overall opinion at the end. If you're considering a purchase or upgrade to the XZ1 Compact, I hope you find this video useful in your decision making process, and if you do, please subscribe and leave a positive comment below. I've always liked the form factor of the Xperia Compact range, and in a world where phablets are now becoming the norm, small devices seem to be a dying breed, particularly in the Android world. I was really looking forward to a flagship compact from Sony this year, ideally with a higher screen to body ratio than previous models, but unfortunately we didn't get that. When the XZ1C was launched, it seemed to tick almost every box in theory. Top-tier processor, a decent amount of RAM, an improved screen, louder speakers than last year, a step up in build materials, increased battery performance, and an intriguing camera package. It's a shame that there's only 32GB of onboard storage, although there is microSD expansion available, and there's still no optical image stabilisation either. At a relatively high launch price of £500 here in the UK, the XZ1C really needed to impress me to justify keeping it. Let's take a look at the phone in more detail, and for those that are interested, I'm often asked about my display setup. I use the Nova launcher with the Pixel icon pack, both available at the Play Store. Firstly, the look and feel. Sony's omni-balance design remains largely unchanged yet again, and so the wide bezels are now making the compact look a little bit dated against some of the competition in 2017. I quite like the chunky solid feel, the rounded off blocky edges help with one-handed use, and the body offers better grip than smooth glass or metal. It's better at repelling fingerprints and is hopefully quite durable. I like that there's no camera hump, so it sits flat on a surface without rocking and is harder to damage the lens. The volume rocker is still too short in my opinion, but at least it's moved back above the power button again. It's a shame to me though that the lanyard loop hasn't made a comeback this year, as I really miss that design feature. The speed and accuracy of the fingerprint sensor has been improved very slightly over last year's X Compact. And of course it's personal preference as to whether you like the positioning. Personally, I prefer it here rather than on the back, but I now feel that it's not as convenient to locate and use as a sensor positioned below the screen, particularly on a small phone like this. It works quickly though, and once you get the hang of the location, you'll be fine. Bear in mind that it's still not an active type sensor, so a slight button depress is required each time you unlock. There's no tap to wake currently on the compact either, and combine that with the speed of the fingerprint sensor, it's not very easy to quickly check notifications without unlocking the phone, unless you use a finger that hasn't been registered. It has a USB Type-C charging port which supports the latest fast charging technology, but the supplied charger does not meet the same standard. At this price, that's poor show from Sony. Despite the glass composite body, there's no wireless charging either, another thumbs down for that omission. I'm really not a fan of the metal lips at the top and bottom of the phone. They are angular, and the corner of the one at the bottom digs into my hand uncomfortably when I'm using the phone for prolonged periods. I think this will also be a place for fluff and dust to gather as well, evidenced here already. The 2.5D curved edges to the glass offer a nice smoothness to the touch, but will invariably mean that tempered glass screen protectors will not extend to the edges properly. Hopefully the Gorilla Glass 5 will mean no protector will be needed, but it's a consideration if, like me, you prefer the peace of mind that using a protector brings. On the plus side, the screen quality is excellent this year. The blacks and colours are great for an LCD, and viewing angles are better than the Z5C. In fact, they're better than some AMOLEDs. The lovely clean white tone really makes this a punchy and impressive screen for all content, and it reaches a decent enough brightness level for readability in well-lit conditions. If you're concerned about the relatively low resolution, don't be. Whilst a boost to 1080p this year would have been welcomed, on a screen this size the visual improvement would be negligible, but battery life would definitely have been compromised. Overall, I rate the screen really highly, and it's the best I've seen in the compact range so far. There's way more contrast than the Z5C, although this can mean a slight loss of detail in the dark areas. If anything, it can be a little too contrasty sometimes, but the colours and the blacks in particular are excellent. Day-to-day phone performance has been good as expected. The top-of-the-range processor, combined with decent amounts of RAM, push the pixels of this screen without breaking a sweat, which means that everything is smooth and quick and the phone hasn't overheated once. If you're a heavy gamer or use demanding apps such as video editing, then you may appreciate the performance more than the rest of us, and aside from the screen size, I'm pretty sure gaming is as good here as it is on any other current device. I think that hardware performance has plateaued in the last couple of years, and even last year's mid-range X Compact easily kept up with all the things I use my phone for, so in reality, the only benefit to me of the new processing package is for future-proofing. The XZ1 Compact comes with the current latest version of Android installed straight from the box, Oreo. I won't go into any depth here about that specifically, but visually it's very similar to Nougat, and other improvements such as battery efficiency etc. are barely noticeable as they're mainly under the hood improvements. I'm a huge fan of front-facing stereo speakers when using a phone, although if you keep yours in a trouser pocket with the screen to your leg like I do, the speakers will not be as loud as a decent side or bottom firing speaker. Sony have said that the speaker volume in this year's model has been dramatically increased. I've not found that to be the case in my day-to-day use. It's slightly better than the Z5C, but not by very much. It sounds clear and doesn't distort even at full volume, but it is not loud enough, and I've missed notifications when the phone is in my pocket or I'm driving. I expect more from Sony, but it does seem to be like a deliberate choice of theirs. Sound from the headphone socket is very clear and the phone supports high-res audio, but volume levels have been capped too low for me again. Sony always seem to do this. The FM radio has been removed this year, which is a shame. Although I don't use it that often, it's always useful to know it's there. Call quality from both sides is very good and signal strength from mobile is fine, nothing special. Wi-Fi signal strength is a standout though, and even weak signals are held better than many other phones. Bluetooth range is good too, and I haven't noticed any connection issues with my headphones or when connected to the car audio system. Moving on to the camera, I must admit as a self-confessed camera nerd, I was really looking forward to the 960 frames per second slow motion video recording. The tech needed to achieve that in a device of this size is really impressive to me, and although I was aware of its limitations, I couldn't wait to give it a try. As with all slow motion recording, there needs to be as much light as possible. Here are some examples taken on a very bright day at a local park. I had great fun using it, although of course when the light isn't as bright the quality really suffers. This was still in daylight, albeit in cloudy conditions. The one-handed operation when using the camera though is second to none, a simple swipe to change modes and all functions are within easy reach. I don't think there's a better option out there currently in terms of ease of use, and there are some fun options to play with as well as the increasingly reliable auto mode. That's all well and good, but how about the results? I must admit that on this lovely punchy compact screen, pretty much all of the photos and videos do look amazing. My first day out with it really wowed me until I got home and had a closer look. If you're simply posting to Instagram and Facebook etc, you'll probably be more than satisfied. Details are sharp, especially when taken in good light, and performance is quick. Focus speed is not quite up there with the best of this year's models, or even last year's to be honest, but generally speaking it's still okay. There are some software enhancements such as a predictive focus option which can help deliver the perfect shot with a moving subject by taking a few before and after you press the capture button. Nothing new but well implemented anyway. There's also the obligatory background blur mode, and I found it to work better than many others I've tried and can give some quite effective results. If like me though you're a bit of a pixel peeper, or you like to view your photos on a laptop or even a large screen television, then the XZ1 Compact's camera output might disappoint you. There's some serious over-processing happening that doesn't stand up very well to close scrutiny. Even brightly lit photos start to look awful if you zoom in too closely. I'm not comparing it to a standalone camera, but I don't experience similar issues with other phones in this price bracket. Colour balance can also be a bit wonky, particularly with reds and greens, although I found that with Sony devices before. And when the light fades, that's when the quality really falls off a cliff. Aggressive noise reduction decimates the detail, and what's left can be mushy and only really acceptable when viewed on a very small screen. I don't want to be too critical, as for 90% of users it will be great I'm sure, but yet again Sony seemed to have overpromised and underdelivered with the camera, And with a flagship price tag this time, from a company with such an impressive heritage with camera hardware, it's a real shame. Optical image stabilisation would definitely have helped. Slower shutter speeds would help collect more available light. A wider aperture lens would have helped further, as we're stuck at a fairly unimpressive f2.0 here. But worst of all is the processing, and there's no excuse for that. The XZ1 Compact is capable of lovely photos, but it's when the light fades that the results are poorer than they should be, and even the HDR mode only kicks in when shooting in manual, which is quite an inconvenience in difficult lighting situations. I really like the ultra-wide aspect of the selfie cam though, LG style, and there's a reasonable level of sharpness in the shots. However, the in-camera processing again smooths the details a bit too much for my liking, in a sort of a forced beauty mode, and there's often a weird skin tone applied which can make the subject look like they're made of clay. I've spent a lot of time using the camera and also discussing it here. It's one of the main selling points of the XZ1 Compact. I may be being overcritical, but personally I was a little disappointed. As a side note, there's still a delay rendering the zoomed in details using the Sony album app. This might be fixed with an update. Video recording is excellent. The electronic image stabilisation works really well, and touch to focus is fairly smooth. Sound from video recording is also good. Unfortunately though, the camera app is showing some teething problems for me, especially when in slow motion mode. It does occasionally crash, seemingly for no reason. Again, hopefully this will be addressed with an update soon. There's a fairly bare bones manual mode for stills, but it falls short of those found on some other high-end Android devices. Third-party camera apps might help here, but if you're looking for complete manual control over photos, video and sound, I really think that LG offers better options in this price bracket. Of course you do lose the compact form factor. The dedicated two-stage shutter release button has a welcomed return, and it launches the camera from lock status in fairly quick time, as does a double press of the power button, although still not as quick, for example, as last year's Samsung S7. Shot-to-shot times are only average, although the burst mode does work really well and very quickly. Battery life for me was acceptable. I've been spoilt by the 3-day plus battery life of my Lenovo P2, but I'm glad that this Sony has returned to the previously impressive figures of the Z3 Compact when that first came out. I'm not a heavy gamer. I average around 5 to 6 hours of on-screen time, with a screen set on auto brightness at around 50%, which I find to be more than adequate in most situations. Without a 3.0 quick charger in the box, I was only able to manage a charge from 0 to 100 in around 2¼ hours or so. Standby time is okay, it lost 6% over 12 hours. Software is very similar to previous Xperias, fairly stock but with a few tweaks, many of which are quite useful. Annoyingly, Sony is still guilty of not allowing a full uninstall of some of the bloatware they've added, and certain nagging notifications are hard to get rid of, such as software updates, etc. But in general, there's nothing too bad to complain about. I have experienced some app crashes though. As I mentioned, the camera has frozen on me perhaps 6 or 7 times, and the phone has also restarted for no reason a couple of times too. Not too worrying. It may be that Sony's version of Oreo wasn't quite ready. As a footnote, I also found that the torch brightness is pretty low compared to others, and as I'm not interested in the 3D mapping feature, I haven't included it here, but there are plenty of other YouTube reviews that look into it in more depth. I'm actually less blown away with this year's compact than I was with the Z3C and Z5C when they were launched. For clarity, I'm not saying this is a worse phone, but it is a matter of expectations. The more expensive a device is, the better I think it needs to be. When there's a plethora of impressive budget and mid-range options out there that in actual fact are good enough for probably 95% of us, the more expensive devices like this need to stand out from the crowd in some way. The Z3C and the Z5C both had more standout features than the competition at the time. Those features don't seem as unique anymore, as competing manufacturers have raised their game, while Sony seem to have got a little stuck and have lost their creative innovation. The XZ1 Compact offers something that is increasingly hard to find nowadays: flagship features and performance in a conveniently small device. It's a definite step up from last year's mid-range X Compact and from the Z5C from 2015, although that does still give you probably 98% of the features that this one does. and careful shopping can pick up a decent used Z5C for around a quarter of the price of this 2017 model, and as my recent review video of that phone suggested, it's a better buy now than it's ever been, especially as many of them still have plenty of the Sony's 24-month warranty left. If this form factor were more competitive, and I really wish it were, I don't think the Sony Xperia XZ1 Compact would shine very brightly in the marketplace, especially at its launch price of £500. Value is subjective, of course, and £500 to you might be peanuts, but to me it's not. So to summarise, aside from the USP of the fun 960 frames per second recording and the really lovely screen, there's very little to actually impress me with the XZ1 Compact. Other phones are available with waterproofing and stereo speakers now, so that the Sonys no longer stand out, and the rather dated design and lack of dual camera may also harm sales. But when choices are so restricted for small Android phones, the Sony still offers a very capable, well-made, but ultimately slightly disappointing option. It just needed to be around the £300 mark to make it a little bit more compelling. Thank you for watching. Please help the channel by hitting the like button and subscribe if you want to see more in the future. Bye for now until the next one.